it's the, I guess, was that the gong that began it? Okay, so you can ring the gong again just to make sure. And then what happens is that after that gong is rung, it's played. And then what you do is go to the. Yeah. Good one.
Okay, so we're going to do the gong one more time.
One more time.
I have climbed highest mountain. I have run through the fields only to be with you. Only to be with you. I have run, I have crawled, I have scaled these city walls, only to be with you. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. No, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I have kissed honey lips, felt the healing in the fingertips, burn like fire. This burning desire. I have spoke with the tongue of angels. I have held the hand of a devil. It was one empty night. I was cold as a stone, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. No, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I believe when the kingdom comes, then all the colors bleed into one, bleed into one. But yes, I'm still running. You broke the bonds, you loosened the chains, you carried the cross of my shame, of my shame. You know I believed it, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. No, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. No, I still haven't found. Yeah, what I'm looking for. No, I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Oh, thank you. As Unitarian Universalists, we come together in worship each week to honor what is of worth. In this hour, we pause the everyday rush and flow of our lives in reverence and thanksgiving to connect with what is sacred, to remember our commitments to each other and the world. Whatever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, whatever your name for the sacred, you are very welcome to bring your full self here. My name is Diana Lindley. I am your worship associate today. Our minister, the Reverend Kimberly Johnson, is usually in the pulpit, but occasionally members of the worship committee present a talk. Today's speaker is a member of the congregation, Ken Ettlinger, who will speak on his personal reflections on growing up without religion. We are very pleased to introduce our music director and musician for today's service, Stephen Skolberg. Our tech hosts make it possible for people on Zoom, as well as on our YouTube channel, to see today's service. Today, Kent Martin and I think Reverend Kimberly are our tech people. Do we have any visitors who would like to introduce themselves?
Hello. Morning, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
No, you can be there. That's fine.
I'm trying to unmute myself to introduce myself. I don't know if you hear me.
We can hear you on Zoom,
Well,
but
you
I
are
don't know
very
if,
welcome.
I don't know
Thank
if,
you. I'm on the phone. My name is Barbara.
but I don't know if, I
We're
don't
happy to
know
see
if
you.
the
You're very
person
welcome
speaking
here.
can hear you. Can, or someone, can you check on that?
And please take a moment now to greet your neighbors.
Hmm.
I think we can only hear each other on Zoom, but hello.
I'm chatting to the tech person to let them know that that is happening.
Yeah, I have that somewhere after this, I guess.
Okay, I told them. I don't know what they'll do about it. Oh, Reverend Kimberly, I see that your thing says tech. Is there anything are you there? Maybe she's not there at the moment.
Sue Penny has an announcement for us.
Good morning. I just want to give a shout out for the worship service next Sunday. It is our animal blessing. So you may need a little time to prepare your dog, your cat, your turtle, whatever you feel like bringing that you'd like to have blessed here. The intention is to be outside, weather permitting. We'll have the wonderful Stephen performing and Luca with some poetry.
And the Reverend Kimberly asked me to remind you that today at noon, the your UU elevator speech. If you want to introduce someone to Unitarian Universalism in 60 seconds or less. And I guess that will be in person here. I don't know if it's going to be on Zoom as well. Somebody asked me that. Okay. So let's see. So Patience, is she here? Would you like to help to light the chalice? you. The Chalice Lighting words, amid all the noise in our lives, we take this moment to sit in silence, to give thanks for another day, to give thanks for all those in our lives who have brought us warmth and love, to give thanks for the gift of life. We know we are on a pilgrimage here, but a moment in time. Let us open ourselves here, now, to the process of becoming more whole, of living more fully, of giving and forgiving more freely, of understanding more completely the meaning of our lives here on this earth. The words of Reverend Tim Haley. Please rise as you feel willing or able for hymn 360 in your gray hymnal.
Hymn leaders?
Sorry, Diana.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We all have ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
And Ken will now give the first of 3 parts of his message.
Thank you, Diana. The major Western religions can provide a lifetime grounded in faith. They do so for a great many people, but when humans take on the authority of God, they often do quite the opposite to the values that religion was intended to promote. This is a story about the evolution of what became my religion, but it is also a story of my parents and grandparents who inadvertently shaped it. Some years back, I made a pilgrimage with my son Zach to the church with whitewashed walls at the base of Via Randazzo, where my grandmother was born in Campariale, Sicily. On this trip, I would introduce him to our Italian heritage from my mom's side. I think there is value knowing where you come from, walking the paths of your ancestors, and immersing yourself in the sights and sounds which are foreign and yet familiar. It gives you a sense of place, a sense of who you are. Church records show that Domenica Randazzo was baptized in 1885 in a small church. Domenica Randazzo, you know, I'm happy to see my niece, Andrea, whose name is Andrea Domenica, in honor of her great grandmother. Grandmother Randazzo learned the catechism, the rules that Catholics live by, of which there are many. She made her first communion there. I remember the story of the well. My mother recounted to me, like her mother to her. The open dug well was used by the people of that parish and was in front of that small church. There wasn't any other water source except the rain and this very deep well. The story goes that leaning over the edge, you can hear the shrieks and wails of those poor souls that were buried deep under the debris of some past earthquake, sinners who failed to repent. My grandmother and her sisters drew pails of water daily, lugging them uphill on the street that bore their name, past the rows of attached houses built on top of the rubble from the Greeks and Romans that lived there once before. The sisters only approached the well out of necessity and never lingered long. From the limited information that my grandmother gave my mom and my mom to me, Zach and I did find that small whitewashed church with the well in front of it, a place that neither my mom nor I had ever seen or been. The walls of that small and narrow building were braced with rods extending from one wall to the other, secured with bolts on the outer walls, an attempt to preserve the church, weakened by frequent seismic tremors. The interior of the church was sparse, unlike the glorious cathedrals of European cities which exude opulence. At the altar was a simple, brightly painted Virgin Mary. There were no Vatican treasures here. Sicilian Christianity is different. There are elements of the supernatural beyond rituals of Catholicism that were conveyed to my mom from my grandmother, a combination of mythology, history, and magic. As an infant, I wore a peach pit attached to a ribbon and a small iron lock and key that would protect me. I still have it somewhere. I'm not sure how it works, but that is a faith that my mom and my grandmother had. I long learned that faith is not science. When people tell me they have faith, I accept that. Faith can comfort in a way that science cannot. The power of faith is perhaps like the power of prayer. The science is sketchy at best, but who am I to judge something that so many people find connects them to the spiritual? My mom, although a modern woman, believed that there were people who could cast the evil eye, and you should know how to protect yourself. Cross your fingers behind your back and say these words, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." And with that, you're protected. There were rituals of mourning. We wore black out of respect for the recently deceased for months. And then the olive oil ritual. One never discards an empty olive oil container without pouring salt into it because, well, not to do that is just tempting fate. And I don't know if you still do that, Andrea. I do too. It's a really weird thing. There were days when the mirrors were covered, so we would not see our reflection. And of course, we abstained from eating meat on Fridays. There were other rituals that I am suppressing at this very moment. We found the house of my grandmother's uncle, who had received money from relatives in America and was given the responsibility of taking his 3 nieces to America to marry them off. Sicily was in havoc at that time, the late 19th century. The reunification of Italy was not peaceful, and it was a time of great economic chaos, leaving the agrarian population particularly impoverished and at the mercy of wealthy landowners. The Catholic Church was the focus of my mom's Italian immigrant family. My maternal grandparents were laborers and farm workers who lived in poverty all their lives. It has never escaped my notice that the very poorest people, those that struggle the most, rely on God to save them. The promise of something more, something better, always awaits those who are true believers. It is a powerful message. My grandmother was only 12 years old when she was taken to America. She spoke Sicilian, a distinct language more related to Latin, Greek, and Arab than Italian. My grandmother couldn't write, she couldn't read, she never learned English, and she wrote an X when she needed to sign her name. Once in Brooklyn, my grandmother, Dominica Randazzo, was given to Thomas Columbus to marry. Thomas changed his name from Palumbo, thinking that the name Columbus would open doors. It never did. Grandfather Thomas was from Naples. I met him once or twice, but I never learned much about him. My paternal grandparents took the biblical passage from Genesis about being fruitful, quite literally, and they had 11 children. 2 died at birth or very young. Even today, the discussion about birth control and abortion among Christians continues to be of great importance, while the discussion of childhood poverty, malnutrition, and care for the mother is, well, less so. Clearly overwhelmed by her fate in America, my mom said that my grandmother was often depressed. She would cry over and over in her Sicilian, "Why did my mama send me away?" I cannot imagine the sorrow caused by the mass exodus from this little town in Sicily, or for that matter, in all those places where parents last see their children leave home, last time hoping their lives would be better. In Sicily, it was mostly the female children that were sent away since they would only produce more hungry mouths to feed. My grandmother died when she was 43, in childbirth. Her father, Thomas, was often away looking for work, and my mom took care of her siblings in a 2-car garage on Litchfield Avenue in part of Babylon known as Hell's Kitchen. It had a dirt floor and it had no electricity. A simple sheet separated the boys' sleeping area from the girls'. Mom missed a lot of school after her mother died. Washing the laundry, making meals, caring for infant brother Teddy took precedence. One day the principal told her that if she continued to miss classes, she needn't come to school, and so she just stopped going. She was a 7th grade dropout. Ida was a neighborhood who befriended my mom and helped her and her family, providing food and clothing through her struggles in the Babylon garage in the years following the birth of Teddy, a kind soul who saw the need and responded in the way that people do, that good people do. Sammy, her husband, worked as a laborer with my father, Albin Ettlinger, and Ida arranged for the marriage of my mom and dad. My parents were married in the Lutheran church, my dad's religion. Uncle Teddy came with the marriage, and it was left to my parents to raise him. It was a marriage of convenience, and as a team, they made it work. After Mom left the 2-car garage, her youngest sister became pregnant and moved in with a black family who gave her refuge and where she had her baby. Antoinette got a factory job in Farmingdale, and for the first 2 years of life of the little boy, he was raised with the children belonging to the family she was living with. Antoinette brought the baby to church so that he would be baptized. The priest had several issues. He thought that the white baby should be raised by a white family, not an unwed mother living with a black family, and he felt that the mother would not be able to raise the child properly within the Catholic faith. He could offer no help to the mother nor the baby. Later, a group of women from the Catholic Church came and took the baby away. No one knows what happened to the baby. Antoinette would never see her child again. Mom had a complex relationship with the church, perhaps knowing that Antoinette's life would be a tragic one. Antoinette became a recluse. At the end of the story is that Antoinette lived alone upstate in an old beat-up trailer in the woods, far away from other people, in a sort of self-imposed penance. But then there was more that bothered my mom. Sometime after her marriage to my dad, a Catholic priest told her that having been married in the Lutheran church, she had rejected her religion. He said, "Perhaps you did not think things through. You were immature." The final straw was when she was told that she was living in sin. She would never confess to living in sin with my dad because her marriage was simply not a sin in her view. Dad was baptized Lutheran and did not want to promise to raise us children in the Catholic tradition. He may have harbored some prejudice against Catholics. I would like to think that he wanted us to be free thinkers, and my mom accepted that. After her last child was in high school, me, she began to attend Catholic Mass again. I don't remember ever being in a church except for a wedding and a funeral, so protected as I was from establishment religion. My family moved from Deer Park to Babylon Village when I was in my teens, and I would walk with my mom to St. Joseph's Church on rare occasions. She would place her kerchief over her head and kneel in the pew, her hands clasped in prayer, sometimes fiddling with a string of rosary beads she carried in her pocketbook her entire life. There was a sadness as I watched my aging mom quietly say the Hail Marys, framed by stained glass and vaulted ceilings. Sounds of the church organ came from the balcony, the smell of incense, words in Latin made even more incomprehensible as they resonated off of brick, stone, and glass. I walked the Stations of the Cross before service began and checked out the confession booth, which to me was a curiosity. There was a chamber where the priest would sit on one side, separated by a screen, where the confessor kneeled to confess his or her sins. In the booth, sins could be forgiven, indiscretions vanished, assuring the faithful Catholic a place in heaven. What kinds of burdens would be lifted off the shoulders of the faithful in the simple act of confession? Imagine the power given to the priest who listened to the confession had the power of the Almighty to grant absolution. My mom would not consider confessing her sin, and therefore not being in the church's grace, she could not celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion. We quietly left the church in silence as the center aisle filled with those going up to the altar to receive communion. She would make the sign of the cross before turning her back on the altar and proceed toward the doorway instead. I never realized the importance of communion to my mom. To me, it would appear to be simply a bit of bread and a sip of wine, but to the obedient Catholic, it becomes the body and blood of Christ. The Bible says, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me and I in him. Through communion, we are united to the humanity of Christ, to his divinity, to the source of life. Years later, a young priest came to my mom's bedside to administer last rites, and finally she received communion and was reunited through the grace and mercy of that priest. In that moment, my mom's shame, which caused her to be so conflicted for most of her life, was removed, and in that simple gesture, she was united with Christ and at peace.
Thank you, Ken. Now is the time in our service when we have our offering. We support the work of this congregation through the gift of our time, our talents, and our treasure. Your financial contributions help to support the ongoing work of this congregation, including worship, religious exploration, and community care and connection. And your generosity is reflected in the ways that we are able to show up in our community for justice and service. Our minister's discretionary fund provides support to individuals in immediate need, and our Helping Hands Fund provides support to local organizations. To contribute, you can use the baskets that will circulate, or you can also use the link on your chat online.
God had a name, what would it be, and would you call it to his face? If you were faced with him in all his glory, What would you ask if you had just one question? Yeah, yeah, God is great. Yeah, yeah, God is good. Yeah, 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 yeah. What if God was one of us? Just a slop like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home. If God had a face, what would it look like, and would you want to see? If seeing meant that you would have to believe in things like heaven and in Jesus and the saints and all the prophets. And yeah, yeah, God is great. Yeah, yeah, God is good. Yeah, 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 yeah. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home. Back up to heaven all alone. Nobody calling on the phone, except for the Pope maybe in Rome. God is great, yeah, yeah, God is good, yeah, 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 yeah. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home, trying to make her way home, like a holy rolling stone, back up to heaven all alone, trying to make his way home. Nobody calling on the phone, except for the Pope maybe in Rome.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Ken will now do part 2.
Is anybody on Zoom?
Yes, there are a bunch of us on Zoom.
I'm on Zoom. Can you hear me?
I don't know if you can hear me. Several of us are on
I
Zoom.
don't think you hear me. I unmuted.
Zach,
Can you hear me?
accompanied me on the pilgrimage to
Uh-huh.
Campar Real in Sicily, and also I'm talking about my dad's birthplace, and he also accompanied me there. So this is that part of the story. My dad was baptized Lutheran, as his mother was from northern Germany, which is where he was born. His dad, my grandfather, was baptized Catholic from Bavaria, southern Germany, which is where my Ettlinger ancestors originate. He migrated north as a young man looking for work, a wife, and whatever would come his way. You may have thought Germany was typically divided into East and West, but the religious and cultural divide is between North and South. Some Germans call this the white sausage divide. Who knew? It doesn't seem like the difference between Protestant and Catholic should make much of a cultural difference. And perhaps I'm drawing stereotypic conclusions in what I saw in the relationship between my dad, born in the North, and his dad, born in the South. I am told that people of the Lutheran North are stuffy and a bit pompous. The Catholic South is, well, more laid back. A German I confided in considered the Southern Germans a bit like the grasshopper in Aesop 21-11, you remember. Doth ants had stored up sufficient grain for the winter, when grasshopper humbly begged for food. The grasshopper said, I was too busy making music. Therefore, I just forgot the summer was gone. Making music, said the ants. Very well, now dance. You remember that. When I drove around Bavaria in the fall a few years ago with Zach, in a pilgrimage to find the remaining Ettlingers, sure enough, it seemed that every little town there was music and dancing in the streets. White sausages were in abundance, and the beer flowed copiously. In the 1920s, grandfather's wife died in childbirth, common theme in female mortality at the time. And he came to America to be with his son, my father. Grandfather Ettlinger, that is Ettlinger with an I, not an E, he was the polar opposite of my dad. Grandfather kept pigeons he brought from Germany to breed and introduced to North America, and raised white doves because, well, they are the image of peace. Yellow canaries he raised for their song. He played the accordion with more gusto than anyone should. Census records state his occupation as groundskeeper, and that he was. His small parcel of land at the edge of Deer Park, where the Pine Barrens began, was an oasis of beauty. He had flower gardens that you could get lost in. I was prohibited from going behind the garage in the back garden, where I have since learned he grew pot, presumably because cannabis boosts a pigeon's morale when mixed into their feed. When grandfather had visitors, the homemade jug wine flowed. In his 80s, he was still a party animal. When he died, we discovered an incredible stash of eclectic smoking pipes, unlike those I had ever seen. Grandfather was too much of a free spirit for my dad. My dad worked hard for long hours all his life. Grandfather hardly worked. When my sister Josephine went to college, grandfather wrote her every week. Unlike my dad, grandfather was a man of letters. I recently read one of his more succinct letters. He writes, "My dear teacher," because my sister was going for a teacher's degree at Plattsburgh State College, "your father tries to do his best, but he can certainly be a stick in the mud. Signed, your loving grandfather." Grandfather wasn't exactly a devout Catholic. He didn't attend the Catholic Church in Deer Park, but he did so without care. He coasted through life with the certainty that the best is yet to come. It is said that every other male in Bavaria is named Joseph. Grandfather Joseph Ettlinger deserved a place in heaven for that and many other reasons. My dad immigrated from Germany just after World War I, and opportunities looked bleak in his homeland, and so with a bunch of bananas and the promise of a job with his uncle in Brooklyn, he set off from America. Do you know the story, Andrea? I think Zach does too. He had little formal education, but he apprenticed to a number of tradespeople growing up, carpenters, bricklayers, and stonemasons. It is your experience and the ability to change direction when you need to, see opportunities, and to make good choices when your heart tells you to. That helps you to succeed. My dad recognized opportunity and all the ways that he could help his community and pitched in time after time. When a house fire claimed the life of a little girl in Deer Park, he formed the volunteer fire department. He also created Suffolk County's central alarm system, the forerunner of 911. At the time I grew up, Deer Park was mostly a small community surrounded by pitch pines and scrub oak. My siblings and I spent our days hiking in the woods, and exploring the ponds and streams not too far from the house. We foraged for berries, my brother hunted rabbits for the table, and we learned about nature mostly from my mom. Nature is still my refuge, the place I go to meditate, find my inner peace. Sundays were a day of rest. No one rushed off to church, unlike us. Instead, Sundays were a time of lazy mornings with relaxing breakfasts off of coffee and conversation. My siblings helped my mom prepare a large afternoon meal that we would enjoy with family, friends, and always visitors. It was the odd mix of people who would drop in and spend time together with my parents. My dad was a pragmatic, quiet man, a great problem solver who people sought advice from. My mom was a terrific cook, welcoming and gregarious. They accepted everyone for who they were, anyone who needed a listening ear, or to simply spend time with other kind people, or needed a meal and didn't want to be alone. As the youngest, I set the table. Our family was not wealthy, but everyone had a place at the table. No one was left out or left the table hungry. My mom could turn a few potatoes and dandelions picked from the roadside into a feast. She could extend a pot of soup into enough to feed an army. Sunday was for our family and for the extended family of visitors to our home. We broke bread with folks of all nationalities, all religions, all ethnicities, sinners and saviors, rich and poor. What an experience for this kid who sat in the background and quietly listened to their stories. Here I learned about suffering, empathy, sharing, selflessness, kindness, and joy. I don't think I could have had a better non-religious training while growing up. Diana?
There we go.
Let this be a house of peace, of nature and humanity, of sorrow and elation. Let this be our house, a haven for the healing, an open room for question and our inspiration. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of freedom, guardian of dignity, worth beheld inside us. Let this be our house, a platform for the free voice, where all our sacred differences here shall not divide us. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let all in this house seek truth, where scientists and mystics abide in reverence here. Let this be our house, a house of our creation, where works of art and melodies consecrate the atmosphere. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of prophecy. May vision for be our common theme. Let this be our house of myth and lore and legend, a trove of ancient stories and cradle of our tenderness. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace.
And Ken will now share part 3 of his story.
There are actually 8 parts to the story. I hope you have the rest of the day free. I was indeed brought up as a free thinker, not indoctrinated into any particular religious belief system. For this, I am grateful. It allowed me to examine religion and spirituality as an outsider. It wasn't until later in life that I found out that I was not alone, that there were others who had beliefs similar to mine, a religion and a church family where I belonged. The Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, have a place in our society, but I would be a hypocrite to say that I could ever accept their teachings. These religions share a commonality, originating in the same part of the world and having a common story. They have value in their stories and their best intentions. It does bind us together when we share the rituals and work for the common good of the society we're part of. It communicates the stories of good and evil. It provides a moral template and establishes a value system. Religion attempts to answer all those existential questions, such as where do we all come from, although never very well. You simply call those questions a mystery. In fact, our Unitarian Church is founded on the basics of Christianity. Probably the most important contribution of Christianity to our faith is the central concept of grace. Grace is the unearned, unconditional love that grows from the divine or from the goodness within us and others. It's a reminder that no matter our mistakes, we are still worthy of love and redemption. Religion can inspire us to be better than we are. John Lennon wrote, "Imagine there's no heaven and no religion too." But he was not advocating abandoning religion. Instead, as a humanist, he was advocating the examination of those inherent flaws we find in traditional religion. For example, I'm almost certain that the heaven and hell of traditional Western religion doesn't exist. Those worlds are borrowed from ancient mythology. Perhaps Western religions exploit these stories to gain or maintain power and control. Just a hunch. There are people who live their lives preparing for heaven and those who spend their life fearing hell. Imagine all the people living for today. We can make our brief time heaven on earth. Sometimes, on the individual level, it just takes a change in attitude, how we face each new day, remembering that human kindness matters. And sometimes it requires a major social, political, or environmental movement to make our collective lives better. Religion can cause conflict. Religious wars fought over the assumption that your beliefs are better than mine, that you are the chosen ones and the others are misguided or evil. If only Western religions were about adhering to the benevolent God or the teaching of Jesus, imagine all the people living in peace. It is one of the West's greatest tragedies that we fail to see that the great Western religions are basically the same. Religion can hinder scientific and social progress when the search for truth is abandoned. Research that can reduce human suffering and progress toward a more perfect world can be halted by religion. Human rights and acceptance of diversity can be replaced by the disparagement of those that are different. Not exactly the brotherhood of man. Religion can be hypocritical, demanding others to be virtuous while religious institutions and leaders do not live up to the same ideals. We know evangelistic and fundamentalist teachings taken to the extreme can do such terrible damage to their societies. Religion can cause psychological harm when it causes guilt and fear. Too many people like my mom spend their days disrupted by the ghosts of their early indoctrination. In stark contrast from most religions, we UUs draw out from many sources of wisdom. We embrace peace, justice, and equality. The UU tradition focuses on the shared humanity of all people, transcending the traditional religious divides. We aspire to be open-minded, inclusive, emphasizing personal responsibility and spiritual growth in our search for truth and meaning. Ralph Waldo Emerson, an important figure in Unitarian history, wrote, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." And for this community of free thinkers, I am grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Please rise as you feel willing or able for hymn number 318 in your gray hymnal.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with all and justice strive to make us free. I love that song.
The words for extinguishing the chalice are in your order of service. Let's say them together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please remain seated to enjoy our postlude.
And I imagine you might know some of the words, so sing along.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. it's only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Yeah. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. Nothing but greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I